I hadn't heard from my family in years, not since I packed up my things, locked the door of my childhood home, and swore I'd never come back. So when the invitation arrived, a simple, stark envelope that I almost tossed without opening, I could hardly believe it. The words, "family reunion," mocked me from the front, as if they thought everything could just go back to how it was. I should have ignored it, I knew that much. After all, what could they possibly want after all this time? But the nagging voice inside my head, the one I'd spent years trying to silence, started whispering, "What if this is your chance? What if this is the one time they actually acknowledge you?" I'd made a career for myself as a graphic designer, living in a modest apartment I paid for with my own hands, no thanks to them. But part of me, maybe the part that was still desperate for their approval, wondered if going would prove something. Show them I'd made it, that I was good enough, even if they didn't care. So I threw on my jacket, grabbed my purse, and made the drive out to the same old house, the one I'd left behind. When I got there, nothing had changed. The house was still the same, too big for the three of them. And yet, the moment I walked in, I felt like a ghost. My parents barely acknowledged me, too busy chatting with my siblings, who all looked the same as they did when I left. Too good to care, too wrapped up in their own lives to notice I existed. I stayed quiet, stuck in the background, like I always had. I tried not to let the resentment rise, tried to remind myself this wasn't about them, it was about me. But it was hard, harder than I thought. Every casual remark, every dismissive glance, made me feel like I was back in high school, begging for approval I'd never get. There it was again, that old ache, the one that said I was never going to be enough for them. I stood in the corner of the room, trying to ignore the buzzing inside my chest. It felt like I was watching a rerun of my life, the same tired scenes looping over and over. I was the smart one growing up. At least that's what they called me. The good kid. The one who always did her homework and stayed out of trouble. But being smart wasn't enough to earn me their attention. It never was. I'd spent my whole childhood trying to get noticed, but they never looked up from their own lives long enough to care. My older brother, Michael, was always the golden boy. Mediocre grades, no real ambition. But he was the one who got the praise. Michael's got potential, they'd say, even when all he did was sit around playing video games or talking about his latest half-baked idea. And then there was me, quiet, driven, always knocking it out of the park at school in life. But somehow, it was never enough. I remember the way my dad would barely glance up from his work when I told him about an art project I'd just finished. How he never asked how I was feeling, how my day had gone. He just wanted me to stay out of his way, get good grades, and stay quiet. And my mom? She was too busy with appearances, too obsessed with making sure the house looked perfect. The yard was spotless, and everyone was happy. But behind that glossy surface, there was nothing real, nothing for me. The emotional neglect was subtle, like a poison dripping slowly into a glass, until one day it was too much to ignore. But even so, I kept hoping. I kept thinking that maybe, just maybe, one day they'd see me for who I was. I waited for the day my father would stop working long enough to notice what I'd accomplished. I waited for my mom to look at me and say, "I'm proud of you, just for being you." The cracks started showing more clearly now that I was older. I could see Michael for what he really was. Lazy, spoiled, and completely uninterested in growing up. He got away with everything. And my mother, she still had that same manipulative streak, playing the martyr and twisting everything to her advantage. "Michael, honey, you're doing great," she'd gush at him, while I stood there, quietly seething. I knew she was just trying to keep him happy, so he wouldn't cause a scene, so he wouldn't sulk in his room all day. But it never made sense to me how he could get all this praise for doing so little, while I worked my ass off just to be ignored. I'd sit at the dinner table, trying to make conversation, trying to get them to see me, but it was like I was invisible. My mom would flip through a magazine, my dad would mutter a few words about his latest deal, and Michael would crack jokes, barely paying attention. And there I was, sitting in the middle of it all, wondering if it would ever change, if I would ever matter. That resentment I'd buried deep inside me all these years. It was starting to rise again. It felt like I was reliving all the old wounds, reopening them. And as much as I tried to fight it, I was angry. Angry at them for making me feel like I didn't matter. Angry at myself for still caring, after everything. I thought I'd let go, but I hadn't. Not yet. In that moment, standing there at the family reunion, I realized something. They'd never see me. They'd never understand. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part of all. Dinner was a drawn-out version of everything I hated about my family. The table was crowded, but it felt emptier than ever. My mother was busy discussing the garden with my sister, as if it were the most important topic in the world. My dad, of course, was lost in some business talk with Michael, as if his latest project at work actually mattered. I could feel their eyes on me when I spoke, though. Not in the way someone listens to what you're saying, but in the way they watch something they don't quite understand. Like a bug pinned to a board, only there to be dissected. "So, Lisa," my mom began, her tone too sweet, too careful. "How's the, graphic design thing going? I've heard people make money doing that, right?" She barely glanced at me as she cut into her salad, clearly trying to sound casual. But it was the same question I'd been dodging for years, and I knew where this was going. I could feel the weight of everyone's attention. My dad glanced up from his plate, uninterested but slightly intrigued, as if he'd never really bothered to ask before. "It's cute, honey. I mean, it's not really a real job, but, it's nice that you enjoy it." I swallowed the knot in my throat and forced a smile. Cute. That word. The same one they used to describe my art when I was younger. As if what I did didn't matter. As if what I was building from scratch, by myself, without them, was just a passing fancy. But before I could say anything, Michael, sitting across from me, piped up. "Yeah, maybe if you got into something more practical, like accounting or real estate, you'd be set. I mean, that's what's really secure, right?" I could feel my blood boiling beneath the surface. My brother, the guy who couldn't even hold down a part-time job at the local coffee shop, was the one telling me how to be successful. The irony was like a slap in the face. "You've got it made though, Mike," I said, my voice too tight. "I've heard real estate's booming. All that hard work you're doing, right?" He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly not expecting any pushback. My father barely looked up, distracted by his phone. I could feel the tension rising, thickening the air between us. It's good to have a real career, something stable," my mom said. Her words sharp now, like she was trying to school me, rather than just make conversation. "What you do is nice, sure, but it's more of a creative hobby than anything." A hobby. I almost choked on the word. All those hours I'd spent perfecting my craft, designing logos, building websites, making something that actually mattered in the world. And she still didn't get it. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I bit my tongue hard, swallowing the insult with a forced breath. "Sure, Mom," I said, voice thin, barely masking the fury beneath. "It's a hobby, glad you think so." Dinner dragged on. The small talk, the dismissive glances, the endless interruptions. They didn't see me, they never had, and I was so tired of trying to make them. I excused myself as soon as the last of the dishes were cleared, not waiting for anyone to stop me. I didn't need to hear any more of their condescending praise for Michael's latest half-baked venture or their fake smiles. I needed space. I needed silence. The bathroom door clicked shut behind me, and I leaned against the cool sink, staring at my reflection. The girl staring back at me wasn't the successful designer who built her own life. She was the same kid I used to be, small, quiet, constantly striving for their approval, but never getting it. I couldn't breathe. The humiliation hit me all at once, and for a moment I felt like I was drowning in it. I was that invisible child again, the one who had never been enough, the one who had tried so damn hard. Why did I still want their approval? Why did I still care? They'd never see me for who I was. They would never accept me, no matter what I accomplished. The anger came in waves, quiet at first, then building until it was roaring in my ears. I wasn't going to do this anymore. I wasn't going to keep bending myself into whatever shape they wanted. I was tired of playing this game, of hoping they'd change. They wouldn't. I had to change. I stood up straighter, eyes steely in the mirror. The time for trying to please them was over. No more trying to earn their respect or pretending to care about their opinions. I was done. And tomorrow, I was going to take control of my life, of my choices, of everything. This reunion was the last straw. I wasn't just walking away from them, I was going to make sure they never had any hold over me again. The feeling was unfamiliar. It was freedom, and it was mine for the taking. I spent the rest of the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The more I thought about the dinner, the more I realized how much I'd given, how much I'd bent myself over and over to fit into the mold they'd created for me. They didn't deserve my efforts. I'd tried so damn hard to make them proud, to win their approval. But after all these years, I was just another footnote in their perfect little world. A cute little hobby that didn't matter. I had built something for myself, something real. My career as a graphic designer wasn't just a job, it was everything. It was the proof of my worth. I had made my way on my own without them. And yet, they still didn't see it. They didn't care about how much work it took to get here, how many nights I stayed up tweaking designs or scrambling to meet deadlines. They dismissed it all as if it were nothing. It stung. It burned deep. But it also lit something inside of me, a fuse that was just waiting to be set off. I had spent too many years cleaning up their messes, managing their finances, making sure they didn't fall apart because they couldn't manage the simplest of things. I had stopped counting the number of times they'd come to me for help. Moments when they needed me to fix their investments, balance their books, make their financial decisions for them, because they didn't have the patience or knowledge to do it themselves. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. They never even thanked me. I opened my laptop and began to review their accounts. This was something I knew well, too well. My mom's credit card debt, Michael's barely functioning trust fund. They'd all leaned on me, used me, treated me like some kind of invisible bank account. And I had let them. No more. I started small, with my mom's accounts first. Her spending had always been excessive. But it was the little things that bothered me, the charges for things she didn't need. The way she'd use credit cards like they were free money. It wasn't like she ever paid me back. Ever. I changed her account password, locked out access to her credit lines, and froze a few of the old accounts I'd helped her open. A small change, but one that would make it harder for her to keep digging into my pockets without realizing the shift. I took a deep breath, trying to push back the knot of guilt that twisted in my gut. They'd made me feel like I was always responsible for everything, always cleaning up their mistakes, but no more. The next target was Michael's trust fund. I'd been managing it for years, mostly because he couldn't be bothered. He'd never thought about the long-term consequences of his actions, and I'd had to step in more times than I could count. But I was done. I locked the account, set up alerts for any suspicious activity, and cut off the automatic payments I'd been quietly transferring to cover his bills. I knew the second he realized he couldn't access it, he'd panic. And when he did, I wasn't going to be there to fix it. Not this time. The final step was to make sure everything was protected. I added new security measures to all their accounts, making sure they couldn't just waltz in and change things back without a struggle. I reviewed every password, every login, every little detail I'd previously ignored, because I thought it was easier to just handle it myself. Once I was done, I sat back and took a breath. For the first time in a long while, I felt something other than resentment. I felt relief. I wasn't saving them anymore. I wasn't fixing their messes. I wasn't going to let them treat me like their personal safety net. As I closed the laptop, I realized something. This wasn't just about money, it was about taking back control. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life making their lives easier, pretending I was the one who had it all figured out while they made everything harder. I was done. I wasn't prepared for what I found. I'd been scrolling through the accounts, checking each one carefully, trying to make sure everything was locked down tight. It was the usual, my mom's credit cards, the accounts I'd set up for them over the years. But then I stumbled across something I hadn't expected. Michael's trust fund. I knew he'd been draining it, taking money here and there. But this was beyond anything I'd thought possible. I pulled up the transaction history, heart sinking with each line. Withdrawals, big ones. Almost every weekend, always at odd hours. Some of them were close to a local casino, late-night cash-outs that totaled in the thousands. It didn't take a genius to figure out what he'd been doing with that money, My stomach churned as I clicked through more records, following the trail. Every time he took out money, my parents just let it happen. They hadn't said a word about it, hadn't questioned a thing. All the while, they'd been acting like I was the one who couldn't hold my own. They'd criticized my career, called my work a cute hobby. But they were funding Michael's addiction without batting an eye. I sat back, a hollow feeling settling in my chest. How had I never seen this before? All these years, they'd made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't doing enough. But here they were, silently watching their son gamble away everything while they showered him with praise for his potential. I felt like I was going to explode. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through more of the records. It wasn't just Michael, it was my mom and dad, too. They'd been covering for him, paying off his debts, pretending like everything was fine. And all the while, they'd pushed me to be better, to be the responsible one, the smart one, as if that was some sort of badge of honor, as if I should be grateful for their approval. But this was worse than any rejection they'd ever given me. I felt disgusted. How could they not see what was happening? How could they be so blind to their own son's destruction, and so focused on my choices? I slammed the laptop shut, but it didn't help. The anger swelled inside me until I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, back and forth, trying to make sense of it. I had always been there for them, no matter what. And yet they never once stopped to ask how I was doing. Never once checked in on me. They had used me as a safety net, a tool. And now I was realizing they'd never valued me as a person. Not once. Not ever. This was my breaking point. I wasn't just some bank account to dip into when they needed me. I wasn't a backup plan. I was done letting them use me like this. I was done being their fixer, their emotional crutch. It had to stop. I sat back down and opened the laptop again, determined. The first thing I did was set a plan in motion to cut all financial ties with them. I started by setting up a separate account for myself, one that was airtight, so they couldn't dip into it without my knowledge. I froze all access to my accounts, tightened security even more. No more automatic transfers. No more loans that I would never be repaid. No more managing their mess. Then, I made a decision. I would stop helping them with their finances altogether. I'd been doing it for years, and they'd never appreciated it. Hell, they hadn't even acknowledged it. It was time to stop, and not just for my sake, for theirs too. They needed to learn to stand on their own. Michael needed to face the consequences of his actions. My parents needed to wake up. I didn't care anymore about their anger, about how they would react. This wasn't about them. It was about me. I stood up and stared out the window for a long time, my mind running through the details. There was no going back now. I couldn't unsee what I had just discovered, but I could control how I moved forward. And moving forward meant cutting them loose, finally and completely. It was time for me to stop being the one who fixed everything. It was time for them to finally face the mess they'd created. The next morning, I didn't waste any time. I called my lawyer, Karen, first thing. She was the one person who always knew how to handle the messes I had to deal with. And right now, I needed her to help me untangle myself from the chaos my family had made of my life. I need to cut all ties with my family, I told her, my voice steady but tight with resolve. Financially, legally, everything. I can't keep managing their crap anymore. She didn't hesitate. Let's go over everything, Lisa. We'll start with the basics. I spent the next hour on the phone with Karen, explaining everything, my parents' accounts, Michael's trust fund, the cabin property they were planning to renovate without my approval, the automatic payments I'd been making to cover their bills. I told her about everything I'd done to secure my own finances. She listened, taking notes, and then calmly walked me through the steps I needed to take next. You've done a good job locking things down on your end, she said, but we'll need to formalize it. You'll want to freeze their credit cards, lock them out of any joint accounts, and make sure all the transfers are documented so they can't come back at you. I could feel the weight of the last few years starting to lift as Karen outlined the steps. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was taking back control. It wasn't about being vindictive. It was about protecting myself, drawing a line that said, this is where I stop fixing everything for you. Once I hung up with Karen, I didn't waste any time. I logged into my bank accounts and froze everything. The automatic payments for my parents' bills stopped immediately. The credit cards I'd been managing for them, locked out. I made sure every action was legally protected, documenting everything carefully, covering all my bases. It felt almost too easy, like I'd been holding my breath for years, and finally exhaled. Then came the cabin. I had a small stake in the family property, something I'd inherited that I never asked for, but had been trying to ignore for years. They were planning a huge renovation without my input, and I'd always let them take the reins. Not anymore. My name was on the property, and if they thought they could do whatever they wanted, they were wrong. I drafted a formal email to the contractor and my family's lawyer, outlining my objections and making it clear that I wasn't on board with the changes. I attached copies of my legal documents to make sure they understood the seriousness of it. My parents hadn't even asked me about the renovations, hadn't even tried to include me. It felt like another slap in the face, but this time, I wasn't going to just sit back and take it. After I hit send, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, feeling a strange mix of pride and relief wash over me. It wasn't just the practical steps I was taking. It was the emotional weight lifting off my shoulders. For the first time, I wasn't apologizing for being me. I wasn't apologizing for being successful, for building something with my own two hands. I felt powerful, in control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging for their approval. I wasn't bending over backward to fix their mistakes. I was finally doing what was best for me, and it felt damn good. The relief didn't hit all at once, but slowly, piece by piece. As I realized I wasn't doing this for them, I was doing it for myself. No more playing the martyr, no more sacrificing my own happiness for theirs. It was my life, my decisions, and no one was going to control them anymore. The phone call started just a few hours after I hit send on the email about the cabin. I wasn't surprised when my dad's number popped up on the screen. His name, with that stern, no-nonsense tone on the other end, was exactly what I expected. "Lisa," he barked, like I'd just committed some unforgivable crime. "What the hell do you think you're doing? You need to unlock those accounts." Now I didn't flinch, not even a little. "No," I said, my voice calm, steady. "I'm not unlocking anything." There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear him trying to keep his temper in check. "What do you mean, no? You're just going to let your mother and I—" "No, Dad," I interrupted, feeling the weight of the words finally coming out of my mouth. "I'm done managing your finances. I'm done cleaning up your messes. You're going to have to figure this out without me." The silence was deafening. Then the anger came, sharp and biting. "You've been helping us for years. Now you're just going to walk away?" "No, Dad," I said, forcing the calm back into my voice. "This is about me taking control of my life for once. You and Mom, you've been using me as your safety net. I'm done." I didn't wait for a response. I hung up. I sat there for a second, letting the stillness settle in the room. It felt good, so good. But I knew the storm wasn't over. Minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Michael. I almost didn't answer, but I knew I had to, if only for the closure. "Lisa, what the hell?" he said, his voice high-pitched, panicked. "You're cutting me off? You know how bad things are. I need your help. You're the only one who understands the mess I'm in." I took a breath. This was it. The same thing every time. He'd fucked up, gotten himself into some mess, and now he expected me to fix it. "You've known the situation for months, Mike. You've had every opportunity to fix it yourself. I'm not doing this anymore. Please, you can't do this. What am I supposed to do now?" His voice cracked, desperate. "Mom and Dad can't help. You're the only one who has the skills to get me out of this. Please, Lisa." I stayed quiet for a second, letting the silence hang there. I knew how this worked. Guilt, manipulation, the same old tactics that they always used to reel me back in. "No, Michael," I said finally. "I'm done. You need to face the consequences of your actions. I'm not your safety net anymore." He didn't say anything for a long time. The silence stretched on until I heard the click of him hanging up. It wasn't even an hour before my mom's name flashed across the screen. Her tone was different, soft, almost wounded. She was good at this, real good. "Lisa," she said, trying to sound hurt. I don't know why you're doing this. I thought we raised you better than this. You're being so unreasonable. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" I felt that familiar knot of guilt twist in my chest. She always knew how to make me feel like the villain, but not anymore. "No, Mom," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not doing this because I want to hurt you. I'm doing this because it's time for me to stop being your fixer. You and Dad have used me for years, and I'm done." I could practically hear her eyes narrowing through the phone. "You're being selfish, Lisa? This is all about you, isn't it? Well, let me tell you something. You'll regret this. You'll see that we were just trying to help you." I didn't say anything back. I didn't need to. I disconnected the call and let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It hit me then. How deep the manipulation had run. All the years of guilt trips, the silent expectations, the subtle digs. I'd always been the one to fix things. I'd always been the one to step in when they couldn't handle their own problems. And now, when I'd finally said no, they couldn't handle it. As I sat there, reading through the flood of angry texts they'd sent me, each one accusing me of being selfish, unreasonable, spiteful, I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I wasn't trying to be their emotional crutch. I wasn't trying to make them see my worth. And that, right there, was the moment I knew I was done. I deleted their texts. I turned off my phone for the first time in years and didn't feel an ounce of guilt. They weren't going to change. But I had. And that was the only thing that mattered. The days that followed felt like a slow exhale, deep and necessary. I took a step back from everything, from the constant noise of my family's demands. And for the first time in years, I focused on myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. It wasn't as easy as it might sound, though. For years, I'd put everyone else's needs before my own. I didn't even know what I liked to do anymore, not really. My hobbies, the things that used to make me feel alive, painting, hiking, photography, had all fallen by the wayside while I tried to fix my family's messes. But now, I started picking them back up one by one. I dusted off my old camera and went for walks, taking pictures of things I never noticed before. The way the light hit the trees in the afternoon, the little details of the city that had once sparked my creativity. I found myself getting lost in it, the simple joy of rediscovering something that used to be mine. I also started reading again, real books. The ones that weren't about finance or managing other people's problems. I'd forgotten how much I loved losing myself in a story, how easy it was to sink into a world where the only thing I had to solve was the plot. Work was another thing I threw myself into, but this time, it felt different. I was doing it for me. I began taking on larger projects, the kind that stretched me, that pushed me past my comfort zone. I was getting noticed, finally. People were starting to take my work seriously. My designs weren't just cute anymore. They were getting recognized. Clients who once ignored me were reaching out. I felt that familiar buzz of pride every time a project was finished. But now it wasn't tainted by the guilt of feeling like I should be doing it all for someone else. It wasn't just about the work, though. It was about who I was becoming in the process. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, wasn't checking to see if my family was watching, wasn't worrying about whether they were proud of me. I was proud of myself. And then there were my friends, real friends, the ones who actually saw me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. They noticed the changes in me before I even did. They saw the shift in my energy, the lightness in my step that had been missing for so long. "You look happy," my friend Nora said one night when we grabbed dinner. "Like you're finally free." I laughed, a little unsure of how to take the compliment. "I think I am," I said. "It's weird, though. I never realized how much I'd been holding on to until I let go." They supported me in ways I never expected. They cheered me on when I started taking on bigger projects at work. They didn't judge me for cutting my family off, didn't ask questions, just gave me the space to be myself. They knew how hard it had been for me to break free, and they were proud of me for doing it. The hardest part was still learning how to focus on me, not as a response to someone else's expectations, but because I deserved it. I learned to say no when I didn't want to do something, even if I felt guilty about it. I learned to set boundaries, to speak up for what I needed, and to unapologetically put myself first. I also started going to the gym, something I hadn't done in years. Not to fix my body or try to meet some unrealistic standard, but to feel strong, to feel like I could push myself just because I wanted to. Slowly, I started to feel healthier, not just physically, but mentally too. As time went on, the anger I'd carried for so long, toward my family, toward myself, began to fade. I wasn't carrying their expectations around anymore, wasn't trying to be everything for everyone. I was just me, and that felt like freedom. It wasn't perfect. There were days when I still thought about them, when the guilt would sneak in, but those moments were fewer and farther between. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just living to meet someone else's standards. I was living for myself, and that was enough. More than enough. A year later, everything felt different. My career had taken off in ways I hadn't imagined. I was leading bigger projects, getting clients I used to only dream about. My work felt like mine now, not something I did to get someone else's approval. I didn't check over my shoulder for signs of validation. It was just me, doing what I loved. And I was good at it. My personal life? Quiet, peaceful. I'd built new routines, things that were mine. No more scrambling to put out fires for people who didn't care to ask how I was doing. No more pretending I could fix what wasn't mine to fix. It had been months since I'd heard from my family. The silence was heavy at first, but it had become my sanctuary. I didn't miss the drama, the guilt, the constant feeling of being stretched too thin. I was at a mutual friend's wedding when I saw him, Michael. He was standing by the bar, chatting with some people, looking different. The first thing I noticed was the way he was standing, straight, no slouch. His face a little thinner, clearer. There was something calmer about him, quieter. I froze for a second, unsure of how to approach him, or if I even wanted to. But he spotted me before I could decide. His expression shifted, like he hadn't been expecting to see me, but there was no anger in it. No resentment, just something else, a little relief maybe. "Hey," he said, his voice low but steady. He seemed nervous, but there was sincerity behind his eyes. I wanted to thank you for everything, for, helping me face what I was doing to myself. I don't think I would have gotten sober if you hadn't made those changes. If you hadn't drawn the line, I didn't say anything right away. I just studied him, trying to figure out if this was the same person who had once demanded I clean up after him. The same person who had made me feel guilty for not fixing things. The shift in him was noticeable. He looked healthier, like he'd actually started to care about himself. And maybe, for the first time, he was taking responsibility for his life. "I didn't do it for you, Mike," I said after a beat, keeping my voice even. "I did it for me. You had to face your own demons. You had to get better on your own," he nodded, taking the hit without flinching. "I know, but you played a part in it. And I'm sorry if I padua for everything. I get it now. I really do." Part of me wanted to reach out, to soften, but another part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself, stayed firm. "I'm glad you're doing better, but I'm not going back to the way things were. I have my boundaries now. I'm not your fixer." He looked like he understood that too. "I get it. I'm not asking for anything more from you. I just wanted to say thank you." I felt a tightness in my chest, a mix of relief and something else I couldn't quite name. It was strange, hearing him say that, seeing the person he had become. But it didn't change the fact that I was still standing on the outside of that family, no longer trying to get in. He stepped back, giving me space, and I didn't feel the old urge to apologize or explain myself. He was right. I had drawn the line, and I hadn't let him or anyone else drag me back into the past. As I watched him walk away, a quiet sense of victory settled over me. It wasn't a loud triumph, but a deep, quiet one. I had done what I needed to do. I had taken control of my life without being pulled into their messes again. I knew my family might never change, but I had, and that was enough. I was free from their weight, from their expectations, free to live my life on my own terms. And that, I realized, was all I ever needed.